creating careers for San Franciscans, questions on jobs and the economy. The first question will be from Ms. Alioto-Pier. The second question will be from Mr. Avalos. You can ask anyone you want. 30 seconds to ask the question, 90 seconds to answer.
Thank you, Tony. I'll ask David Chiu this question. CPMC is one of the large developments that is on San Francisco's horizon. What will happen with CPMC is kind of up in the air. What are your feelings for CPMC, the hospitals in town, and job growth and how that might affect the city's economy?
Thank you for that question, Michela. CPMC is an incredibly important institution in our community, and I share the perspective that the hospital needs to be rebuilt. That being said, it needs to be rebuilt in the right way, and I know there have been many conversations in recent months of community coalitions coming together to make sure that those who don't have access to healthcare have it, as we consider consolidating the number of hospitals we have, that we deal with all of the planning, the transit, the housing issues that come around that major development project, as we will be demolishing housing and bringing in thousands of folks into an already dense part of the city. And so I have committed publicly, and I have been taking part in trying to move the various stakeholders to literally sit down together to use hopefully a community-based agreement process to negotiate their way to actually build that hospital that needs to be rebuilt given the seismic requirements the state has placed on us. I also, though, think we have to make sure that St. Luke's, which is part of that broader conversation, that that institution remains a viable institution taking care of the healthcare needs of this part of town. And I'm very committed to making sure that happens, and I have had concerns that the development of such a large hospital at CPMC at the Van Ness and Geary corner will undercut the ability for St. Luke's to stay viable, and that is something that I would not support. I want to make sure that both institutions remain healthy and strong.
Mr. Avalos, the next question I thought would be Ms. Rees.
Thank you. This is a question for David Chiu. I'm really concerned about how this city is going to be most of all for the wealthy and the most powerful interests in San Francisco. And you and I had differences about the tax break that mostly benefited Twitter. I actually believe that that was just an example, another example of how the city's working for the most powerful and the wealthiest. And I was opposed to it. Please tell us why you supported that measure and what you think you will do in the future to prevent these types of measures from happening.
I was a proud supporter of keeping Twitter in town, and let me give you a little bit of context. We all know that the mid-market Tenderloin area has been blighted for decades. As a city, we have attempted to create jobs there, but that area, unfortunately, has just been seeing record rates of unemployment, of vacant storefronts, of crime. When Twitter came to us last year and said that they were going to have to leave the city unless we were able to help them, what I told them was we can't create a tax incentive specifically for Twitter, the company, but I was willing to explore a geographic-based tax incentive in that mid-market area to deal with the blight that we have. Now, on top of that, we also know that if Twitter had actually left San Francisco, it would have been a $500,000 hit to our budget immediately. With Twitter staying in San Francisco, even with the tax incentive that they've been provided, our independent economic analyses show that we will see millions of additional dollars of tax revenues because of all of the other companies that are going to be staying here in San Francisco. We've lost literally tens of thousands of San Francisco jobs, hundreds of companies in recent years. And in fact, just today, I was at 6th and Market as part of an announcement of yet another entity that is going to be staying in San Francisco, in the mid-market area. This tax incentive program is keeping not just tech companies here, but is keeping artists, nonprofit organizations, small businesses here. And I think that's an important part of our economic ecosystem.
Next question is Ms. Rees, followed by Ms. Baum.
My question is to John Avalos. John, you have taken a real leadership role in proposing local hire legislation, and I support all efforts that are going to get our local residents back to work. In the process of looking at that, I know that there's been some gaps in terms of skill set for our residents related to being able to get access to these jobs. And I'm curious what your plans are for job training for our residents so they can take advantage of the local hire.
Great, thank you. Thank you for your question. Just to talk about, first of all, how we were able to pass the local hire ordinance. A lot of folks thought that we were never going to be able to pass it, but part of the work of getting it done was working closely with a lot of organizations and communities across San Francisco, labor organizations, community organizations in the Asian community, the Latino community, and the African American community, contractors, large and small. And we really felt that we had to have a strong emphasis on looking at all the trades that do construction. And so it puts a real emphasis on the city that we have to do great workforce development programs. And this is the missing piece for local hires, that we have not yet put the adequate resources in to do the job training work that we need to do. And that's one area that I want to move on directly. I think Ed Lee has initiated that, but he's hit some roadblocks. We need to make sure that our City Build program is going to be really effective in reaching out to communities across San Francisco and helping them get various skills to meet our different building trades needs. We also need to make sure that we're supporting our community-based organizations around here, like Potrero, Hill, Neighborhood Center is actually one of the feeders for the City Build program, to be able to actually get the job training work that we need to do to make sure that our local hire ordinance is successful and that people are ready to get into the workforce for the construction trade that will be enabled when we see the increased amounts of employment rising with the ordinance.
Ms. Baum, followed by Mr. Chiu.
Yes, this question is for Dennis Herrera. With 30,000 citizens in the Bayview and Hunters Point signed petitions to overturn a city decision to give a large tract of land to the Lennar Corporation for development, you refused to allow their initiative to reach the ballot. Will you continue to favor large corporations over the will of the people if you are elected mayor?
Terry, I think you need to familiarize yourself a little bit more with what the role of the city attorney is and with what the state of the law was. We advise our clients, and the elections department asked for our advice with respect to whether the law was followed, with respect to whether the signatures that were gathered, whether they qualified for the ballot, whether the signatures were collected according to the law. That's one of the things about being city attorney. You have to call it like you see it. You call things based on the facts and the law, even when it might be politically unpopular. And I know that there are a lot of individuals that put a lot of work into going out and getting signatures. But the franchise, the right to vote, is a precious thing, the integrity of which has to be protected at all costs. And there was absolutely no doubt in my mind that I had to make the tough call, saying that the law was not complied with when those signatures were gathered. And that went all the way up to the California Supreme Court, and the decision was validated, as unfortunate as it may have been. That's what being city attorney is making the tough calls. I was disappointed. I know a lot of people put a lot of hard work into that, but the law is the law, and you have to call it like you see it, and that's what I did in that case.
Mr. Chiu, then Mr. Dufty after that.
So my question is to Joanna Rees. Joanna, you and I are the two folks sitting here who have had experience in creating companies in our past. And I think both you and I share the frustrations that we have had with the current executive branch for the fact that we right now have 15 departments that are regulating the business community, that we have hundreds of fees that are nickeling and diming small businesses, that hundreds of millions of dollars of contracts are going from the executive branch to large non-San Francisco businesses. I'm wondering if you could share your perspective and frustrations with how the current executive branch is dealing with this issue of job creation and job growth.
Thank you. So I have supported more than 60 Bay Area companies that have created thousands of jobs. I've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs in the community, and entrepreneurs start here and then they tend to leave as they grow. They move their businesses outside of San Francisco. So one thing that, when I talked to these entrepreneurs, they said, no one from City Hall has ever talked to me, no one's ever reached out to me. And I'd love to take the Mayor's Office of Economic Development and expand it into entrepreneurial services. So there are people that are going out to the great entrepreneurs in our community and helping them, steward them through the process of establishing themselves in San Francisco, getting more office space, thinking about issues related to their employees for school and other things. There also are some great hubs of innovation like Rocket Space and another one called The Hub. The Hub has over 800 members of social entrepreneurs who share a collective philosophy of creating socially important businesses. No one, again, has come to them and really helped steward them through the process of establishing themselves as they move out of the hub into their own business. And then lastly, I can't tell you, every time I go visit a merchant, and I've personally talked to about 650 merchants, they always walk me to their wall of licenses and permits. And they said, when I started my business, I needed 3 of these, and now I need 12. The highest cost permit used to be $100, now some are over $1,000. And in order to meet short-term budget needs, we've been adding up incremental costs, and we've got to relieve those on our merchants through the backbones of our neighborhoods.
The next question is Mr. Dunn.
My question's from Michela, Alioto-Pier. Michela, the shipyard plan projects as much as 2.5 million square feet for clean tech companies in San Francisco, and we've currently got about 200 companies that are participating in the payroll tax credit. And so what would you do as mayor to make San Francisco a leader and to fill that space at the shipyard with clean tech companies?
Thank you, Mr. Dufty. When we did the biotech payroll tax exemption, we did something that we don't ordinarily do as legislators, which was we created we joined forces with programs that we helped establish within the school district. And so 6 years ago, when the biotech payroll tax exemption was put into place, we had programs in biotech. One of the good ones, actually, one of the best ones is Galileo High School. So we had kids who were exposed to the issue of biotech, kids who never in a million years would have thought that that was a career that they would choose or one that was even within their realm. We then also created a program within City College. So our kids went in, we did the tax break, we started creating jobs within the sector, and then at the same time we had children who were going in, learning about biotech, moving on into college when they liked it, taking courses at City College, and now 6 years later we see that our children are taking, or young adults now, are taking the jobs that we helped create through the exemption. So it was very focused on our people, on small businesses, and on small business growth, trying to give our young people the tools that they need to go out into the world and start these businesses themselves or become a part of them. I think with clean tech, it gives us a unique opportunity, particularly with all the cutting-edge discoveries that are going on, and all the things that San Francisco has to offer, and the conversations that we have about tidal power and wind power and access that we have to Livermore.
And Mr. Herrera.
My question is for Bevan Dufty. Bevan, you talked in your opening, and as you have eloquently across the city, talked about San Francisco needing to have a black agenda. And from an economic perspective, development perspective, I'd like to give you the opportunity to talk a little bit in detail about how that translates into jobs and economic opportunity.
Thank you, Dennis. The first thing I'd talk about is black business, that I feel that black businesses have all but disappeared in San Francisco, and that these are the businesses that are the most likely to hire individuals from the African American community and to mentor and grow those individuals into success. And so on the government side, I think we've seen too much where firms are bidding, primes are bidding, and they're participating with black-owned and other minority and women-owned firms and projecting 10%, 12% of the work going to them. And then once that work is won, you have negotiations with that city department about a scope of work, and all of a sudden, your 10% job that you've hired people at your firm has now dropped to 2%, and you're not going to start that job until 2 or 3 years into the project's life. And so I think that we have a responsibility in government to keep an eye and make sure that we're doing right by the commitments we're making, much less using a mayor's office to advocate with the private sector, that they're not inhibited by some of the court decisions that have created this whole alphabet soup of how you're getting these businesses to participate. But I would also say, just as an individual, I'm very excited that the owner of Brown Sugar Kitchen is coming out to 3rd Street, to 5800 3rd Street. Tanya Holland is going to come and open in the next 2 months. But you know what? She still needs an investor. And so I'm trying to work with her to help identify that investor. And so I definitely want to say, from an economic development standpoint, that's what we need to do. And when people talk to you about workforce training, what's it mean? It means that the schools haven't educated the children sufficiently to get a job. And that's a failure. We can't have that.
So, Ms. Baum, you've not been asked a question in this round, so you've got 90 seconds to speak on anything you want on the subject of creating careers for San Franciscans. Good shot.
So we cut jobs, we cut hours, we cut programs, we cut taxes, there's less and less money, so the economy keeps spiraling down, and meanwhile the money just gets sucked up to the top. That's what's going on right now in this country and also in San Francisco. And there's a very simple solution for it. It's not socialism, it's just taxing the rich. Duh. We're not talking about eliminating rich people, nothing radical like that. We're just talking about going back to the tax levels that we had under Reagan. And if we had those now, we would have no economic crisis. And this isn't just my idea. Warren Buffett and some of the most intelligent billionaires in Europe also want to be asked to pay a larger percentage of their incredible wealth to help support their countries. They do not want to live in the world that is being created by all this wealth being swept up. So, and in San Francisco, we have 24 billionaires. That's quite a lot for such a small city. And I think we can do them a favor by allowing them to contribute more to our city. We can also start a municipal bank where we can put the money that has been going to the Bank of America, that is our city pensions, into our own bank, so we make the money. And also public power. Let's take it back from PG&E. We've got to be more competent than them, and we can have cheaper power and also more money for the city. Thank you.
We now move into round 2 of questions. I'll remind the candidates that you do have chances to respond to each other's answers. That's why you have 3 blue cards sitting in front of you that are just waiting to be used. All right, the second round.